Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm gonna talk about Shōgun Season 1, Episode 2. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, before we kind of pick up where last episode left off, we actually rewind to a year ago when the previous Taiko was basically on his deathbed dying, and he ended up ultimately wanting to talk to Toragana about the division of power and everything going forward. It's like, right, protect my son, and basically if you want to, I can make you the sole regent. That way, like, you kind of run things until my son's 16 years old of age and he can officially take over position and stuff. But obviously Toragana is like, no, I can't do that. Because he talks about the dangers of that. Like, cool, it puts me in a powerful position, but it literally will make everyone else my enemy, and they'll come after me, and I will lose, and I will die, and so will your son. Which, obviously, the Taiko's like, a good decision. So, he had already crafted the plan about the division of power between the five, and Toragana is like, oh my god, yes, you were so smart, so wise, and so clever. It's still unclear, like, even with the machinations and plans that Toragana is, like, doing present day, I'm still unclear of, like, if he's playing everyone in regards of playing like, oh, I'm the good guy, oh, I don't want power, when in actuality I do. It seems like he doesn't. I just can't tell if he's genuine with it, because Toragana is a very crafty dude, as we see. Like, he sees things like coming a mile away. He knows how to, like, he knows the way people operate. So that's where I'm like, I don't know if that, like, craftiness is used in a nefarious means, like he has ultimately like nefarious plans, or is it just a thing of the whole conversation last episode he had about not wanting to kind of like return to the shogunate, like, because Shogun is a name that was from a brutal bygone era and stuff, but like he was told by, I'm probably going to butcher, I think it's Daioin. She was saying, like, right, you're a good man, but there's a time and place to be a good man, and a time and place where you need to kind of be a little more ruling with an iron fist and kind of be more on an offensive. So I don't know if that was him just placating, like being like, oh, like, I have no intentions of being, like, you know, brutal and stuff like that, when in actuality he does, or does he just legitimately like, no, I'm not about that. It's just unclear to me, because Ishido's not hiding it, like, yo, my man is pretty clear about his ambitions, and I'm just not sure if Toragane, like, he seems a lot more like, it's, at least to me, maybe it's a lot clearer to other people, I just don't know where Toragana's heart lies. To be fair, that goes back to that whole point that Rodriguez had brought up last episode of, there's the heart you put in your mouth, the heart that you in your chest that you let your friends know, and then there's the one that you hide that no one's ever supposed to know, and I'm just not sure where Toragana's heart in that particular case. But ultimately, the Taiko wanted, it's like, right, take care of my son, but also make sure that, you know, obviously wait till he's 16 so he can kind of take the reins of everything and let this, you know, everything I've built kind of be his, essentially. But he says that teach my son, like, a one important lesson, and it's basically, it's lonely at the top, and once you get to the top and keeping what you have at the top, it's very lonely and isolating. So that was kind of a lesson he wanted his son to know. But we go back to present day, and we have John in front of Toragana, and we find out the title from last episode, Ajin, is the name given to him, meaning pilot. You know, just like Father Martin Martin shows up, he's actually, like, what was it, like, his name was like Suji. I was like, why did they give you a Japanese name? He's like, it's because his name is translator, and that's how they, like, refer to him by, like, his translation name, not fully, like, by his actual name. But Martin is there because he was sent by another father on the Portuguese side of things, who was like, yo, we've got the journal, because Vasquez, I mean, why did I say Vasquez? Jesus, I'm thinking about something else. Rodriguez ends up, well, is it because I believe his first name is Vasco, isn't it? Yes, the character's name is Vasco Rodriguez. That's probably where I was, like, getting that from. Anyway, tangents and all that aside, Rodriguez hooked him up with Blackthorn's journal, and they're like, yeah, look at all this brutal stuff he's done. He's not a good guy. But they get to one certain part of the book, it's like, yeah, we can't hand this over to Toragana, because if we do, he's going to ask for the entire thing to be translated, and we can't have past mistakes of ours coming and ruining everything. I don't know if the stuff that, because I can't remember them specifying what it was. I don't think they did. I think they were super vague about it, but I don't know if that correlates to the Macau stuff that comes up later on in the episode. I think those are two separate things. I think the Macau thing's its own thing, and whatever it is they don't want Toragana to know, it's kind of a nasty bit of business. It could be correlating, connected. Maybe it is directly coordinated, and I'm just like not remembering. Like, I don't think they, like, I know they didn't get specific, but I don't even remember. I feel like I don't even remember them mentioning Macau, so I don't think it's the same thing. But maybe, like I said, there's some correlation there. I don't know. But Blackthorn's done his due diligence, like him and his crew, like were, you know, because the whole thing last episode was like, right, they were attacking like Spanish and Portuguese places, like on the way to Japan, you know. Once again, they're claiming not to be pirates, they're like merchants, yada, 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 so on and so forth, that BS. But I guess it's that thing of kind of like, as you're like ripping through the plate, like you need to know your enemy to be able to know when and where to strike them type of situation, so... Either way, Martin is sitting there that he's supposed to basically swing things so that they get rid of Blackthorn. And Martin can't really do too much. He would have done things differently, but the only reason why he didn't is because Mariko's there. And it's like, crap, I know you know Portuguese, so I can't freestyle this like I want to. So he is... Like, even Blackthorn's like, oh, well, here you are going to mistranslate my words. But it's like, no, he does, but that's only because... Blackthorn doesn't know the circumstances they're in right now. It's like, oh, Martin's going to be on his best translating behavior because Mariko's there and she's going to pick up any BS he tries to spew to Toragana. So it's like, it all works out and he's pretty honest and stuff. But then Ishido shows up because he heard about Blackthorn, so they have to lock him up. Where he ends up running into another priest who kind of gives him the lay of the lands, tells him, explains like, okay, so this is what's going on. Toragana's here basically on house arrest until they determine to kick him out of the council and you know, remove him as a regent and then massacre him and everyone associated with him and his allies. Even telling Blackthorn, oh, you're his ally? Like, you're here for a reason? Yeah, you're probably going to end up dead because the moment they wipe out Toragana, like, everyone else is they're going to wipe you out too because of your association and allyship with him. So that's interesting. But he kind of explains that, especially because there are two members on the council who are Christians, that being Kiyama and Ono. Ono has like leprosy, and I think Kiyama's the one that's like, because I know the other one is from a like long renowned like samurai family. Was it like Sugiyama? Might have been the other person's name, but like Kiyama and Ono are the only two that are like the real, like they're labeled as the Christian regents, and then Ishido and the other one, like I said, I think it's Sugiyama, were just kind of like on their own along with Toranaga. But now it's like this little like interesting political game going on, which I thought was so fascinating, that we find out what Toragana plans on using and utilizing Blackthorn, because he's talking to Hiromatsu and Mariko's the one that figured it out. It's like, okay, so obviously the Portuguese are going to whisper into Kiyama and Ono's head that they need to get rid of the heretic that is Blackthorn, because Blackthorn already made it clear. Him and Martin had that whole conversation in front of Toragana, because, you know, Toragana wanted to understand why he had an issue with Martin. It's like, right, the whole Catholics versus Protestants situations. And it's like, right, if they're enemies and those two particular Christian lords are siding with the Portuguese in particular because of religious reasons, they're going to want him dead. They're going to want Blackthorn dead. And this could put Ishida in a very complicated position because he needs everyone amongst the council to vote to remove Toragana and strip him of his like title and position. but he wants to kind of add a little bit of disruption. I even thought it was interesting where like Toragana's like, oh, you could take some Hiromatsu, you could take some that instinct from your daughter-in-law. It already seems like there's kind of friction already because like the husband, like Hiromatsu's son, came in being like very like grumpy, trying to figure out like, oh, like because he was making a comment on how Mariko and their son were laughing like court ladies or something like that. It's like, why did our Lord summon you? It's like, oh, because she knows Portuguese. It's like, why would you need to take part in that? He was even, you could tell, a little salty when Hiromatsu showed up, but being like, no, I don't need you, son. I need your wife. You know, so that seems to rub him the wrong way. I think it's like it seems like a pride thing. He seems kind of like a douchey dude. Mariko's husband. We don't know the full circumstance, but it just seemed very controlling because it just, I mean, it seems like she kind of has to like make herself small in front of him. Like she seemed like not meekish, but she was extra quiet, and like the son's kind of in the same boat too, where it's like, I mean, he's the father. He has the most authority in the family under the circumstances. So I mean, I guess a lot of that plays a role in it, but it just, I'm curious to find out what that dynamic's really all about. Circling back really quickly, there's obviously Blackthorn is worried because he's approaching his execution, but he's like, no, I'm not supposed to die here. And the father that's with him is kind of like, which I should also note, that actor, I think his name is, I looked it up, I hope I'm not butchering it. It's like Joaquim de Almeida. He's just one of those actors where you're like, man, I've seen this guy in so many things. I can't pinpoint what exactly, but he's just one of those actors who had that familiar face. You're like, he's one of those, I know that guy actor type of situation. So, but he had referenced like, oh, he's been here since like 72. He's like, yeah, I came here with a vision of all the souls I was going to save. But it's like, yeah, they have no intentions of saving their souls. They have the black ship. Basically, because China and Japan are not in good terms, they used Portugal to be their means of trade. And that's where the black ship comes into play. Like, that's the foundational ship for that represents the trade system between Portugal. I think it's specifically Spain and Portugal and Japan, but it's all done through Portugal, but it also includes Portugal and Spain, to my understanding. Sorry, and either way, that's where Blackthorn learned about the Macau situation, which we'll talk about in a second. Other elements are the whole Ishida situation. He goes and visits Yabushige about everything, and he kind of is playing both sides of the fence, because once again, as we learned last episode, he was discussing with his nephew about choosing Ishido's side, and even Ishido's like, yeah, you're trying to like self-preserve yourself, and he's like, yeah, I am, like, because I know if Toragana goes down, I'm going down too, because I'm his ally. But Ishido doesn't know what to really do, because he kind of has to capitulate to Kiyama and Ono, because they made such a fuss about making sure that Blackthorn dies. It's like, we will not sign off on like stripping Toragana of all of his stuff. We're not going to like vote on that until we kill that heretic first. That has to take precedence, which I even thought was interesting, that Ishida had this point where he's like, oh, like, I woke up for the first time this morning, and I think I see us the way Toragana sees us, as bureaucrats, which I thought was kind of interesting. He just kind of seems like, oh, here we are, like, signing off on stuff and kind of like the BS of it all. And it's just like, right, we're going to get rid of Toragana, but like, once again, none of them are, Ono nor Kiyama is willing to move on this. It's like, the heretic needs to die. So he's going to Yabushige about it. But Yabushige is like, oh, well, let me help you out, because, well, if you remove Toragana from the equation, I see why you want to do that. But the problem is, the moment you do that, you're leaving yourself with Kiyama and Ono, who have the Catholics backing them, and that's going to be a fight you're not going to be able to win. So why not kind of take advantage of this situation? But it's like, well, I mean, they've already told me to get rid of him, and I'm already said I would. But Yabushige's like, no, let me handle it. So on his way to being executed, Yabushige hired some mercenaries to take care of this, and then proceeded to murder all the mercenaries, which makes sense. You don't want to tie any of this back to yourself. And when he shows up in front of Toragana with Blackthorn, he's like, yeah, I just happened to stumble across him, like some mercenaries, some bandits were coming after him. I'm like, look at you sly doll playing all sides. Now I was like, oh yeah, I see your storyline, Yabushige. Like, you are going to be like playing both sides. I mean, he's really more Team Ishido, but he also doesn't want to discount Toragana because it's like, well, the guy's got some moves of his own. And I'm sure Toragana sees him for who he is. He's like, oh, yeah, you just happen to keep being in the right place at the right time, don't you? It's like, oh, you just happen to be in the right place where that ship was and you didn't tell me anything about it. But, oh, man, this is the second time you brought this heretic, this barbarian to me. Yabushige's just kind of like, yeah. It's like, he sees through you. But once again, I think it's kind of that thing of, I'm going to let you stay in your position because I'm going to let you think you're playing me because you're useful to me so that I can continue to use you. Once again, Toranaga's pretty swift on all this. But either way, Mariko is the translator, and basically Blackthorn kind of explains some stuff. It's like, right, I want no beef with you and your people, because he had made this point earlier in the episode. I would never make an enemy of you because even if we were enemies, I'd most likely lose you, capitulating. But he's like, yeah, my queen, she wants no beef with you. And it's like, oh, let me show you what we know of the world. Obviously, he doesn't know that much. He's just kind of like, okay, here's the earth, it's round, and here's Japan, and here's England, and just, we took this same passageway because it was the only way to get past the Portuguese and Spanish to get to Japan because they've kept this route a secret. He also brings up the Macau situation, and he's basically explaining that Portugal's mandate is to basically any non-Christian countries to basically wipe out any leadership and replace it with some Christian leaders of their own, which Mariko's having a hard time processing that because she herself is a Christian. That ends up being that point of confliction, which Toragana was talking about a little bit last episode. But it's like, oh, it's like, oh, the way that the barbarian or, Blackthorn talked about your religion, did it bother you? And for her, it's like, well, can I really claim my religion if I'm not willing to have it tested? Like, that's testing my faith. That's kind of a true testament of, whether it's really mine or not, if I'm willing to kind of stand up to any test being tossed my way. So, but yeah, like hearing this about the Macau situation and Ronin being trained there, or Ronin being gathered there, gun running and stuff like that, it's just, that struck Mariko out of anyone. But the real, kick in the balls was when Toragana learned, at least from Blackthorn, let's admit he has a very, very biased opinion in this situation. So it's like, maybe there is truth to it, but he's also made it pretty clear of what he wants here. And the father was like, oh, you came here to wage war. And when ultimately Blackthorn talks to Toragana, it's like, yeah, I'm here to help you take out our common enemy. But it's kind of like, yeah, basically Portugal and England signed a treaty, and certain places, any place that falls under England's territory belongs to England. Anything that falls under Portugal's territory is theirs. And Japan happens to fall under their territory. And that's what pissed them off. It's like, no, we're our own place. We're not under Portugal's rule. We welcomed them in as guests to, trade. It does not mean we own, obviously it's like Japan is, has a lot of pride and honor. It's like, no, we're not going to capitulate to anyone else. And that's what rubbed Toragana the wrong way. We're something of them to own. It's like, no. I think even his son was trying to make a point. It's like, it's almost like trying to, what's the metaphor he made? It was almost like trying to own the sun or stars or something like that. It's kind of what, I would assume sun, because obviously, God, isn't Japan the rising sun? Maybe I'm being stupid. I'm sorry. Once again, do forgive my ignorance. But yeah, that kind of fueled the fire for Toragane. So he's like, okay, the Englishman is going to be staying here in a very particular room, and Mariko led the way. And I even love that one point. He just calls her Mariko. He's like, oh, I appreciate what you're doing for me, Mariko. I know that you're a Christian, but the fact is you should be wary of the Portuguese. And she's like, no. Also, going forward, you will refer to me as Mariko-sama, which I was like, interesting. I mean, Because I guess I didn't even think about it, but like, because I actually don't know how long honorifics have been around in Japanese history. I'm sure it's been there for a very, very, very long time, but it's just, I guess I never think about it in that same sense. But it's so interesting because obviously, like, if you're unaware, without the honorifics, san, sama, even kind of slapping on senpai at the end is kind of that. But obviously, san and sama are the more respectful ones. I can never remember the hierarchy. I think san is higher than sama, but it could be me being wrong. I always forget which one is like the higher respect. They're both very respectful honorifics, but I think one is like it's more respectful than the other. They're both respectful, it's just one's like extra respectful. So it almost makes me feel like sama might be the more respectful one than san. Either way, but without honorifics, you can interpret like that. Referring to someone without an honorific can be seen as it can be seen as disrespectful, or it could imply some close relationship with said person. So I can see Maruko having a problem with that, being like, for one, don't get it twisted, we don't have a close relationship. Obviously, he's ignorant to Japanese culture, so there's that. I mean, that could be ignorance on my part, but that's always been my understanding of honorifics, like saying like a name saying a name without honorifics could imply those two things. I guess in Maruko's case, it could be seen as both. Because it could be a thing of, hey, we're not that close, but it also could be seen as disrespectful because it's like, hey, the fact of the matter is you are the guest here. You're on the lower end of the totem pole. You will show me some respect and honor. That is part of our culture. I get it. You're not aware of our circumstances, so you will have to basically be taught and learned. So, but I thought it was so interesting when Toragana was kind of relaxing and getting ready. I was like, what is he doing? And I was like, especially because they were focusing on the sword, I'm like, what's that about? And obviously Blackthorn doesn't know how to like make himself comfortable, so he's like tossing and turning. I also love the whole bit about the bathing. He's like, whoa, 2 baths in a week. I was like, interesting. He's like, were you trying to catch the flux? Which I was like, wait, what? I had to look it up. I wasn't sure, but flux is another name for dysentery back then. So he's thinking like, oh, that's how you get dysentery. It's what led to it. But it's just, once again, it's just ignorance about... when was bacteria discovered? I was looking it up. It was 1675, but obviously that doesn't mean anything. Just because you discovered it then, people at the time are going to think you're a crackpot and a weirdo, and it's not going to be until much, much later on where people are like, oh, that person all that time ago was probably right about this thing, like they discovered it. I mean, he discovered it. That doesn't necessarily mean he's the one that kind of attributes it to like what... I mean, because obviously there's good bacteria to bad bacteria. I'm going on this whole diatribe because, like I said, I believe I think the first episode said this was taking place in the 1600s, so obviously we're far away from that. So my whole point was they're ignorant, obviously, to a lot of stuff. But he's like, yeah, like taking 2 baths in a week? What are you, crazy? What are you, mad? So that was just an interesting bit. Like I said, I went on this whole massive diatribe, but I just thought that was so interesting. But either way, getting to the end of the episode, we had one of the maids turn out to be an assassin, and it's like, oh, is she going after Toragana? But nah, he was already waiting for her. Like what he was doing, like setting up the cover and stuff, is like, oh, he was setting a trap. Comes out, sword swinging, and slices the maid's neck. But Blackthorn rushes over to kind of help. I mean, all you walked away with was like a cut arm. But it turns out she wasn't after Toragana, she was after Blackthorn because it was Kiyama, and I'm sure Ono like signed off on it as well, because one of the Portuguese priests was like, yo, you need to do something about that guy, like he's causing a lot of issues. And Kiyama, like saying it in Portuguese, basically was like, yeah, I understand, let me handle it. So sent the assassin. This whole thing was a set up by Toragana because he's like, he knew what might be coming. So he's like, yeah, I gave the Ajin my room and I stayed in his room knowing that this was what this was about. They weren't coming after me, they were specifically coming after him because he did let Martine know. He's like, yeah, like that, we're going to hold off on the black ship because I'm not give the sign off because obviously he runs foreign affairs and relations, but Toragana's like, I'm not going to sign off on the black ship because that Blackthorn fellow told me about the Macau situation. So until we can figure out like how much I don't know, we're not going to send any shipments. So that kind of screwed the pooch, and that's what set all this in motion. So it reconfirms what Toragana was already feeling. So it's like, okay, so there's got to be truth to what he said. I don't know for a fact, but this gives me reason enough to like I gave you enough rope to hang yourself type of situation. So how Toragana and everyone responds going forward into the next episode is going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. It definitely puts Blackthorn in a much more favorable position with Toragana, but it's also a situation of, yeah, a lot of people are gunning for your throat, Blackthorn, so gots to be careful. So yeah, the lines in the sand are drawn, so it's gonna be interesting to see what happens next. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.